Which started mine. Tonight, I would like to welcome John Poulter. Evening, John. John, you're still muted. Can you unmute yourself?
How did that happen? Somebody pulled a fast one on me. Anyway, sorry about that. Evening, Mike.
That's fine. I don't think John needs much of an introduction, to be honest. Of course, he's best known for his work on the planning of Roman roads and Roman walls in Britain. However, this evening he's going to be talking about the military roads of Scotland and drawing comparisons, not necessarily similarities, with the Roman road network. I won't say any more and steal John's thunder, so just over to you, John. Reminded to everybody, if you want to put any questions, use the chat function. Those will be passed to me at the end of the talk, and then I'll put them to John. So without any further ado, I'll pass you over.
Right, thanks, folks. Let's see if we can get that going on the full screen. Here we are. Yeah, I'm good. We've got a decent pointer. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. I know a number of my friends will be watching, and also, well, of course, as members of the Roman Roads Research Association, but also maybe some members of the Society of Antiquaries of Newcastle upon Tyne, of which I've been a member for more than 25 years now, and also members possibly of the Railway and Canal Historical Society, which I've also been a member of for some time. Plus also some people connected maybe with the House of Locher publishers on the Isle of Colonsay in Scotland, and also members of the South Loch Ness Heritage Group in Scotland as well, who have both been very helpful regarding some of the illustrations in this talk, which I'll be using. I'm perhaps best known for following Roman roads in Britain, as Mike was saying, but also I've followed many linear features, for instance, canals and railways, and always to try to understand their planning and their engineering. You know, why did they go this way rather than that way? What challenges did they face, and how do they overcome them? So perhaps it's no surprise that I've also followed quite a lot of the military roads in Scotland as well. These are also known as General Wade's roads, although in actual fact most were built by his successors. At this point, based on some conversations I've had over the last few days, I'd better make it clear that I'm not talking about Roman roads in Scotland. There are quite a lot there, and of course they were military, built for military purposes. But the term military roads in Scotland really relates to those built in the 18th century in response to the Jacobite uprisings. And that's what I'll be talking about tonight. I won't be talking about Roman roads at all. So I'm sorry if there's any misunderstandings there. Now, in general, although there are some gaps, following military roads in Scotland is a great deal easier than trying to follow Roman roads. And this is because they're very well labelled indeed by the Ordnance Survey maps on its 1-inch maps, or these are land ranger maps, which are the successors of the 1-inch maps. And not only do they label all the roads very well, but also they distinguish them. The roads that were built by General Wade are labelled General Wade's military road. And those roads built by his successor, Wade's successors, are simply labelled Old Military Road. So if you look at your maps, it'll tell you very clearly which is right. And by and large, I think the Ordnance Survey gets it right. I think there's one or two places where they get the road wrong, and I'll show you one example of that in a bit. But in addition to that, there's some excellent literature on the subject, especially this book by William Taylor. This is the second edition. It's published in 1996 by the House of Locher on Colonsay. It's now out of print, I understand, so only second-hand copies would be available today. But the House of Locher recommends searching via Bookfinder, www.bookfinder.com, for copies of it, and it's well worthwhile, I think. There are also other books on military roads in Scotland, but they're listed very well in Taylor's very detailed bibliography. But this book has been so good that I've not felt the need to resort to any others for details of the military roads in Scotland. Well, I'm working from notes because if I don't, I'll forget to say something that's important there. So sorry about that. I'll also sit back a bit from the light so I don't dazzle anybody. Now, Taylor's book is so good because it doesn't only just describe and map the courses of the roads in detail. And incidentally, you can see that nearly all the, so I'll go look at the map from his book there. You can see that nearly all of the military roads of Scotland were all built in the Highlands, with the exception of this single road down here in Dumfries and Galloway. I'll come to that near the end of the talk there. And don't worry about trying to read the print. I'm going to blow this up in a bit so you can read it more easily. But Taylor has, more importantly perhaps, gone through all of the military records and treasury records, so that with only a few exceptions, we know exactly what each road was built. So for instance, the road from Fort William to Inverness was built in 1725 to 1727. And then part of it was rebuilt 1732 to 3 there. And you can see from this that these are roads built by Wade. It's only a fraction of the roads built under Major Caulfeild. And there are some others as well, some of which are post-Caulfeild here, and some of which are probably Caulfeild, but it's not certain from the documentation. But because of that documentation there, we can see exactly when each road was built and by whom, which is so different from Roman roads there. So this is a blown-up view of Taylor's map from his book, and it's reproduced with the permission of the publishers, by the House of Lockyer. Thank you very much for that. And on this map, the roads shown in red are the roads which were built by Wade, General Wade. Okay, and all the others shown in black are the roads built by his successors. There. Now, before we begin, I need to apologise in advance for any occasional mispronunciation of place names in Scotland. I worked for a short while, a few months, in an office in Glasgow, and my attempts to get some of the Scottish names right were disastrous. For instance, I thought that Twetchar was actually, sorry, I thought Twetchar was what it was. They told me, no, it's Tweaker. And I thought King Gussie is actually King Yusi. And worst of all, my guess at Craigellachie is Craigellachie. They had them rolling all over the floor with that one there. So I'm going to get some names wrong in this talk, I know. So I apologise for it in advance. I'll do my best there. So what I'm doing with this talk, I'll start by reviewing the situation that caused the military roads to become about. And then I'll show you photographs of Wade's roads first, that's the ones in red here, and then some of Caulfeild roads, some of the roads in black there. And then I'll look into what happened to the military roads afterwards. And then I'll finish by briefly reviewing some of the personalities involved there. So to begin with, let's look at the historical background. The two books I particularly consulted are this one, Fortress Scotland and the Jacobites by Chris Abraham and Doreen Grove, published in 1995 by Historic Scotland. And also this one, Scotland Defending the Nation, by Carolyn Anderson and Chris Fleet, which was published by Berlin in Edinburgh in 2018. And I believe copies are available on Postscript for that at a reduced price there. Right, let's look at the timeline then, the history. Back in 1687, James II of England, or the 7th of Scotland, fled, and William and Mary, who'd just invaded England, were accepted as joint rulers by the English Parliament. There was no problem there. But the Scottish Parliament, and don't forget that at this time, England and Scotland were separate nations. They had the same monarch, but the separate nations. The Scottish Parliament was 50-50 about it. But eventually the Scottish Parliament accepted William and Mary as their monarchs as well. But the dissenting members just didn't go off in a huff. They went off and raised a standard in favour of James VII, which was the beginning of the Jacobite cause and uprisings there. But what happened was that Mary died after a while. William carried on his own. And then Anne, Queen Anne, succeeded by Mary's younger sister Anne, still a Stuart there, as Mary had been there. And in 1707, there was the Act of Union to create the United Kingdom, which was linked to England and Scotland. I'm not sure the reason for this. I think it was because of the situation in Ireland and the thought that the France might interfere. But it was much resented in Scotland, and it still is, I'm afraid, there. Anyway, this prompted an attempted invasion by James's son, who would potentially have been James VIII, and landed in Scotland, I think near Arbroath. It also prompted a strengthening of the defences in Scotland there. So we had the defences were strengthened: Edinburgh, Stirling Castle, and Fort William there. Then in 1714, Queen Anne died. And as a Scottish commentator said, the English would rather have a Turk than another Stuart there. So things weren't looking so good. Anyhow, George of Hanover got picked as king to become George I, and that prompted, of course, another Scottish uprising there. This also was supported in the northwest of England as well. There was also a Swedish-backed plot, and we shouldn't forget that at that time Sweden was one of the great powers, like Russia, France, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire, of course, as well. There. Anyhow, a bit later on, there was a Spanish-backed uprising. That was a couple of boats full of Spanish soldiers, invaded at Glenshiel in Scotland, and they were beaten there. Meanwhile, barracks were constructed at Berwick on Tweed, and also Inversnaid and Killyqueenham, which became known as Fort Augustus. We'll come back to Augustus a bit later, actually. And barracks in 1722 were constructed at Bernera, and I think it's Ruthven. Bernera, I'm pretty sure I'm right, because I was told that's how it's pronounced. Ruthven, I'm not sure about. We'll come back to that in a bit. Anyhow, in 1724, General Wade was sent to Scotland to assess the situation. And his report said that in the Highlands, 20,000 men were able to bear arms, of whom 10,000 were in support of the government, that's the government in London, and 12,000 were engaged in rebellion against the government in London. And he recommended that new forts be placed at Inverness and Killyqueenham, Fort Augustus, the Galley on Loch Ness, and repairs to existing installations, strengthen things. So this represents the fort situation, fortification at about that time or soon afterwards. These are the main forts: Edinburgh, Stirling, Dumbarton, and Inverness. And the barracks are Berwick, Inversnaid, Fort William, Ruthven, Fort Augustus, and Bernera. And you'll notice, by the way, that nearly all of those are supportable by sea. You could supply them by sea. Even Inversnaid, it's on Loch Lomond. And of course, Fort Augustus is on Loch Ness. But they could still be supplied by water there. Ruthven was the exception. That couldn't be. That was inland. Now, in this area, roads and tracks did exist in Scotland, but they didn't go where Wade wanted them to go, which was between those military installations, quite naturally, I suppose. But also the roads were in very poor condition. They were suitable for walking single file and perhaps carrying by pack horse, but they weren't wide enough for large bodies of marching troops or the transport of ordnance and wagons and so on there. So on what happened is, on Christmas Eve, Wade was appointed Commander-in-Chief, North Britain, which was the chosen name for Scotland at the time, derogatory, isn't it? And his recommendations were authorised by the UK government in spring 1725. And those recommendations included emphasis on road construction upon communications up to the Great Glen. This is the Great Glen here, from Fort William up to Inverness, and the communications from the south up to there were felt to be particularly important there. The construction of the first road began at Fort William here in 1725. Now, I think that's an incredible achievement, because that approval was only given in April 1725, only given by Parliament and the funding, of course. In that time, the first construction started in the summer of that year. So the movement of men, equipment, supplies, food, and so on there, the surveying of the road and design of how it's going to be constructed, all had to be decided in a matter of about 3 months. I think it's quite a remarkable achievement there of the British Army at the time. So let's begin by looking at that earliest road. Here's Fort William down here. There. Sorry, this is blown up open access ordnance survey map, so it's, I'm able to copy it. The military road went roughly along here, there, and we come to the first significant construction here, near this little hamlet of Highbridge. The road crossed the River Speen there at Highbridge and then carried on up towards this B road here. So I'll begin by showing you some of the pictures of the bridge there, which is the most spectacular of all of the remains of the military roads in Scotland, I think. Here's one of the piers. It was a 3-arch viaduct built in 1725. There, which is about 100 years before railway viaducts were being built. There, and it's the arches that have collapsed. I took this picture myself, I think in the 1960s or 70s, but I've downloaded a couple more from the internet or open access. This is the bridge as it was in 1899. You can see the arches just starting to collapse there, but otherwise it was still intact at that time. This is another bridge showing 2 of the piers this time. And this bridge, this is a picture by, now according to the internet that I got hold of, it's by a fellow called Glenn Wallace. But I see a couple of years later, it was also attributed to somebody called Stephen Brown. So anyway, I hope that's a correct attribution there. Notice no parapets. That was a fairly standard feature of Wade's roads. And it's an optical illusion. It looks as if it might have been built on the curve or on the skew. It's not. I don't know how this has happened on the photograph, but the bridge is actually straight across there. This is just an optical illusion, I think. Incidentally, all of the bridges on the military roads in Scotland were built by civilian contractors who were engaged to do that. It was the soldiers who dug and built the roads, but the soldiers themselves didn't try to build the bridges. Right, so let's look now. The road is where the red spot is, where the High Bridge is, and here is the road coming up from the High Bridge. Nice straight stretch, typical of Wade. Wade was a big admirer of Roman roads there, and he liked their straightness. And again, as a military person, if you think about it, if you've got marching troops to get from A to B, the shortest distance is in a straight line. And also, if you've got to build the road yourself, it's the least bit of road to be built. So it seems very logical. But I don't think Wade really understood how the Roman roads were planned. And I think, to be fair, it's only really in the last 20 years we're starting to get round to really understanding why they're so straight ourselves there. Anyhow, the point to note here is this impractical construction. You can see the road's just been dug out, the stuff dumped on either side here, so you're left with a hollow way. Now, this is crazy in Scotland, because when it snows, the first thing that's going to fill up is the road. And on top of that, if it's rained all day and frozen at night, you're going to have an ice rink here in the morning. It's going to be murder to walk upon or even pull a cart along. But oddly enough, I don't know why, but this stayed the standard style of construction for all of the military roads, including those built after Wade's time. The nearest parallel I can think to this is what I saw going over High Street in the Lake District, which I put down to possibly a later 18th century road. There, parts of that were dug out in this sort of fashion. So you get down to the bare rock and you heap the stuff on either side there. Now let's compare that with typical Roman road construction. And this is taken from my book on the planning of Roman roads and walls in northern Britain. The typical Roman road, about 22 feet wide, solid foundation of boulders and cobbles, then a surface of, clay to give flexibility, and then a surface of gravel there. And this, in theory, is how the books say the Wade's roads were built. Again, a foundation of boulders, a packing layer of broken stones and then a surface of gravel. And then you can see the ridges on either side where they've humped it all up there. Now, I think this is a rather theoretical description. My suspicion is that when Wade were digging the road, if it came down to firm ground, they might lay gravel across it, but they wouldn't put much of a substantial foundation in. They wouldn't need to. And they were in a hurry, let's face it. They were in a dangerous situation. So this is a bit theoretical, I think. Also, the road is narrow. It's about 16 feet if it was a full width Wade road, although some of Wade's roads, we'll see in a bit, narrowed quite a lot in difficult country. Right, so that's a comparison of the roads. Oh, incidentally, before I forget, this construction is very, very similar to that adopted by Thomas Telford when he built his roads in Scotland, and we'll be coming to look at some of those. Well, to look at those and the history of them a bit later. So let's have a deco. Yeah, the road was probably completed as far as that last shot I showed you, where it was coming up from the Speen crossing from Highbridge up to about there in 1725. They didn't get very far, but it looks as if they got as far as 1726 to Fort Augustus. And then in 1727, they built this road on the eastern side of Loch Ness up to Inverness. And it's the right-hand one here they built. This one here on the left, it was built later. I'll come to that very shortly. Right. So let's, I don't have any shots of the road along here. It's partly because a lot of it's under the A82, the modern road, and also part of it is partly disrupted by the Invergarry and Fort Augustus railway, which was built alongside the military road and occasionally overlaps it there. So I'm going to pick up the road here at Fort Augustus and head along the east side of Loch Ness. This isn't a military road. I'd have put money on this being a military road, actually, with tarmac on it, but it isn't. It's not on any maps from even the 1770s there. But Loch Ness is just behind these trees here. Fort Augustus is a bit over on the left, where the pointer is, and you can see this road going up here, climbing up there. This is the modern road climbing up, but a lot of it is exactly on top of the military road, and in places where it isn't, the military road's even steeper. You can see it climbing up there. Right. Well, let's go up to this here and look at this stretch just about here. Now here we've got the modern road beside us where the telegraph poles are. It is a military road, I think, but it's been filled in. I think it's probably gravelled in the early 19th century to make it suitable for early forms of traffic and cars and the lorries and so on there. You can see it is steeper than this, and this is climbing quite steeply. Now, after a great deal of twisting and turning up there, to be honest, I don't know why Wade picked the eastern side to go to Inverness from Fort Augustus. The western side of Loch Ness is a lot easier, and the modern road takes that. The modern road was built, started in the first time in 1821, so it was quite early. So I don't know why Wade went this difficult way, but he did. But after a lot of twisting and turning, he came to this, woohoo, an alignment, a nice straight stretch. And you can see that the alignment set out for exactly where I'm standing with the camera. In fact, part of the road is just here, but it then has to curve. I think this is too steep a drop just off the road here. The road curves around here and then joins the alignment and heads straight for that rock, which it's clearly aimed at there. And that rock is just above a little hamlet called Loch Carrock. And the road then goes around the rock and goes around to the other side and then sets out on a new alignment. And here's the new alignment looking back. So we're looking back to the rock from this area here. And you can see the road having come round just here and running along here. Tarmac, of course, nowadays there. But this is line of sight planning. And I try to show this on my book there. If this had been a Roman alignment, the Romans, I think, would have, they'd have got this far in a straight line. They then would have gone around the rock. It's too difficult to get over. But then, having got around the rock, they'd have gone back to the alignment and carried on with it. Whereas Wade didn't. He just set out a new alignment, and then it changed again. I've marked it a bit in red there. It's not particularly clear. I'm sorry about that. But so basically, having got around the rock, he set off on a new alignment, not related to the first one, unlike the Romans. And this is what I call line of sight planning. Essentially, what it is, go in a straight line as far as you can see, and then look where to go next there, which is simple. A lot of turnpike roads are built in that way. But the Romans had a longer distance planning framework that they worked on. Well, anyway, after having got past the this one behind me now, the road comes to the another famous bridge called the White Bridge there. And here we are, the road is dropping down, past the dog by the looks of it, and coming to this White Bridge. That's my car parked there, is on it. And this is the bridge over the River Fechlin. And you can see a very fine bridge indeed. There's a little plaque up here which says 1732 on it. But see, this has got parapets, but I think these would have been put in at some time afterwards. I don't think these are original, but the bridge is a big arch, you could see, standing very clear of the water. Now, what happened to this bridge? It was built in 1732, according to the plaque on top. But in 1829, which is almost 100 years afterwards, isn't it? There was a very bad flood. This, by the way, this is the modern road bridge, superseding it. After about nearly 100 years, 1829, there was a serious flood which took out the entire underneath of the arch and the road. Now, just think what volume of water must have been going down this river at that stage to do that damage. Anyway, so the bridge had to be fairly substantially rebuilt. Yet the walls apparently have survived the flood. And so they simply built a new arch and built the road on top. And that's when I think the parapets were probably added there to stop people going over in the dark. Also, I spent, just backtrack, I jumped ahead of myself again. When in 1732, it was decided this road here was too exposed, the eastern road, was too exposed to the weather and the climate, especially perhaps in winter. And Wade reluctantly decided to build a new road down to Foyers, which runs along the side of Loch Ness there. Now, unfortunately, I wish I had. I don't have any pictures of that road, but it is an impressive road to drive along and see. It's quite narrow, so you need to take your care, but there it's worth seeing. But also, if you want to see it in an armchair, I discovered there's a YouTube video of a drive along it there, but it has some very impressive straights along it there. Again, Wade living up to his inclination to go for straight roads. And that was built in 1732 to 1733. Now, this road here, meanwhile, has been lost. It's completely lost. It's not known at all where it went. And I spent 3 days looking for it. What I found was, I couldn't be certain that I'd found anything at all. There are lots of traces of old road in the area, but were they part of the military road or not? There's also lots of forestry planting, and there's also, which of course would disturb the road. Here we are. Here's the new road going down to Foyers and along the side of Loch Ness there. And the old road somehow or other went from here somewhere across here. There are traces of it can be found just here near the Christie pylons. And then it joined on just up here to what's an existing road. Let's see if I can show that. Yes, this is this road, Ashy Moor. And that is thought to be the early military road running down via Essex into Inverness. And this is the later military road, 1732, 1733 road. But let me see if I can find some shots of where I looked. Yes, here's in the plantation. I had a good look at this road. I thought maybe it's straight, you see. So I thought maybe it's on top. It's obviously a plantation road, but maybe it's on top of the military road. And where it stops, it comes to a farm gate. And I suppose with the eye of faith, you could say, well, that had perhaps been a road. Clearly been a tractor up and down it anyway. But really, it wasn't conclusive there. But the difficulty in my defence is saying that military roads, unwanted roads can soon disappear. Let me show you some examples. What on earth is that, you might think? This look like a butterfly wing in the middle of this field full of sheep there. And what it is, it's the wing walls of a railway bridge. This is the Highland Mainline Railway from Forres, original Highland Main Railway from Forres down to Aviemore and then down to Perth, built by Joseph Mitchell there. And that embankment, as you can see, has been completely removed, so that looking back, you wouldn't know there was an embankment here. Now, the interesting thing is that only 10 years before I took this picture, the A95 road ran through this bridge and ran along here, and I drove along it there. But again, there's scarcely a trace of where the original road was. So that fence line gives it a bit away, but that's gone completely in 10 years. Further north, up here on this road near Torness, there, which was built, I think, by the county, I think, back in the 1830s. The original road is this one here. This was the A682, and I'm standing on its successor, which is now the B682, just north of Torness. And again, this road I've driven along 10 years earlier. So it just shows how rapidly things can deteriorate and vanish in inclement climate there. Right, so possible OS mistake. I said I'll show you one possible mistake on the Ordnance Survey. I've since found some further light on it. There's a road not shown, unfortunately, on this open access map, but it shows on the 1-inch maps. It runs from just near this shoulder here down to about here. And it's clearly marked on the Ordnance Survey map of 1981 as General Wade's military road. Now, I've looked at the latest edition of the map and it doesn't say that anymore. So maybe they've reached the same conclusion. But I'll show you a couple of photographs of it. I'll show you one at the eastern end and one in the middle. You see, the picture at the eastern end is heading westward. So we're now at the eastern end of the road looking west. And this just looks too, it doesn't look old enough. It looks too modern. It's too sharp-edged there. So that didn't strike me as a military road. And here we are in the middle, looking back to the east. And there's really no sign of a built-up road at all there, or even a cut road at all there. So I thought at the time the Ordnance Survey were wrong. It looks like they've reached a similar conclusion. I only found it out a few days ago. This is, by the way, going through a part of the countryside to the east of Loch Ness called Stratherick. And I'll be returning to Stratherick in a bit near the end of the talk there. Well, those were some glimpses of Wade's first road. Now let's have a look at his second, which was this running from Dunkeld up to Dalwhinnie, Ruthven, I think, Aviemore, and then across to Inverness, running up the centre of Scotland, essentially. It didn't run from Perth, although the main garrison would have been at Perth, I think. But the Perth to Dunkeld road was determined to be adequate at the time. So Wade didn't need to start building his road until he got to Dunkeld. Now, the southern part of this road, that is from the Drumnadrochit Pass, was under the care of Perthshire, who neglected it very badly after it was, well, let it go to ruin, actually. So the first look of this road I'll show you is just about here. It's near Calvin, which is north of Blair Athol and north of Pitlochry, yeah. And you can see the road here is running just here. It's not much trace of it even, but it's running here. And you can see what happens if the drainage gets blocked. It turns into a swamp there. And just over the top of the hill here, a farmer's built his wall in the middle of the road. You see the road's here. So clearly that road wasn't in use at the time. But a bit further along, traces of the original foundation of the road, I think, are showing. And this culvert, good for it, appears to be still working, still having water flowing through it. So well done after, what must be nearly 300 years, mustn't it? So that was rather nice to see that there. Also, a bit further on, this is the old A9 road, before the modern one, the latest one was built. And this, I think, is Wade's road, here, running through here. Okay. Notice the train over here on the West Highland line. This is not the West Highland line, on the Highland Railway main line from Perth to Inverness via Aviemore. Basically, with the layout of the countryside, neither the A9 nor General Wade nor the railway had much choice of where they had to go, and that was up to the pass of Dromocta there, and that's what they're doing. As it happens, the railway stayed on the west side of the river, and the Wades Road and the earlier A9 stayed on the east side. Anyhow, when we get nearer the top there, we come to this, what's known on the Ordnance Survey maps as the Wade Stone. Now, these stones like this were erected beside the military roads to help guide people. You can imagine if the snow's 3 feet deep and you're still trying to go along the road, you'd like to know where the road went. But the difficulty is when they built this is the latest A9 here. So let's just get the cursor moving properly. It's the latest A9 here. And would you believe it, this stone was bang in the middle of where they wanted to plant the new road. So they've moved the stone over here, made a little ornamental feature of it. So you've got these little stonework things over here. But all this is modern. It's a nice touch, but it's all modern. The actual stone itself is the only thing that Wade would have erected there to help guide travellers. Right, a little further on, once we've gone over the Dromocta Pass and heading down towards Dalwhinnie, this is marked again on the Ordnance Survey maps very well as a Wade Bridge, and I think that it probably is. No parapet there, a twin arch or a little sort of a flood arch, I suppose, there, but a nice Hansen Bridge. Here's looking across it, dead straight, and you can see that the railway line has just cut it. The railway was built about 130 years after the Wades Road, and it was hard cheese, no sentimentality there. So the road was cut off there, and in fact what happens, the road I'm standing on was extended further north to cross the river here, the Trewin, I think, a bit later. Right, we'll now jump to the middle part of Wades Road, this road from Dunkeld to Inverness. It's about here, heading towards Ruthven. And although the railway sticks to the valley and joins the Spey just here, the River Spey, and the later A9 does as well, later A9, Wade typically took a shortcut from Etteridge over towards Ruthven, across the moorland there. So it's quite a nice route, actually. But the interesting with this one is that it was abandoned. Yeah, where are we? Yeah, it was abandoned in 1763. Again, I suspect because it was just too exposed to the weather conditions. And then they built a new military road from Etteridge down this way, same as the A9 there. This gives you an idea of what a road may look like after being neglected for 261 years. Here it is running across here towards us. We're looking south. This is heading north this way. Almost disappeared totally there in that time. Here you can start just perhaps to see the start of the edge, although it's been partly filled in. Here we're going past what I think would have been an old mile house. Along the military roads, huts were built at times, known as generals' huts. And I think this may have been one of them, either that or an inn there. But either way, once the road, which is running here, was abandoned, there was no point in this staying up, so it fell down there. And looking further on, looking north, here's the road itself, getting through the bracken, and you can just see the shape of it here. It's been used by a tractor a little bit, but you can see the shape here running, and I think here it's joining the later road, which was a military road, built to get to the barracks at Ruthven. These are the barracks themselves. They're fortified accommodation rather than defensible strongholds. They wouldn't stand a siege, but they were reasonably strong there. Now, this is where I've got problems with Ruthven, because I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. There are several Ruthvens in Scotland, and I know there's one in Aberdeenshire, which is pronounced Riven. So my apologies if I got this wrong. I'll stick to sort of the English translation of Ruthven there. Here's the road going up to the barracks. There's the barracks themselves. And you can see the barracks are actually built, there's another set of barracks here, on a natural glacial feature, which is a dump of there. Obvious place to build a castle. And in the earlier times, there had been a castle on it. And at one stage, it belonged to the Earl of Buchan, known as the Wolf of Badenoch. nice guy to meet, I'd have thought. Anyhow, that's where the military road was heading, and that's Rosslyn Barracks. We're now jumping up here to the bit of the road where it gets to about its highest points, climbs right over the tops here, just north of Sluggan, and then drops down to cross the River Findhorn there. And it's at its clearest there, I think. We're going from south to north for this. So here we are, climbing still up to the high points there. The tractor tracks or Land Rover tracks make it easy to see where it's gone, but you can see the shape of the road quite clearly. Up on top, the Land Rover seems to have abandoned it. And here's the shape of the road in original condition. And it's absolutely dry underfoot. It's in very good condition there. You can see the shape again here. A bit further on, it gets a bit mangled. It's getting into the lower ground, heading now towards the Findhorn, near Tomatin. And you can see it here, but it's less clear. But walking along it, it's fairly obvious it's a big road. These perhaps are some of the stones that Wade put in place to guide travellers. And here's the road coming down to join what is now the modern road, which crosses the Tomatin at this bridge, which is definitely not a Wade bridge. I'd love to have seen the Wade bridge here, actually. It would have been picturesque there, I think. I haven't photographed this road beyond that, however, but it's still a lot of it to be seen. I think it's well worth exploring and worth a good walk. Now let's look at the third road which Wade built, and that was from Crieff through Amelree, Aberfeldy, across to Tummel, and then it joined this road from Dunkeld at Dal na Cardoch there. And this it's illustrative of roads where I think Wade can make mistakes there. This was built in 1730. This one was built in 1728 to 29. Sorry, I should have given you a date for that. 1728 to 29. This is 1730. So let's have a look at it. This is the start of the road. It's near Amelree, this. We're looking north. Here are some of the big stones beside the road. There's some on either side. I've been looking at this, and this is the road itself, very nice and clear, isn't it? I've been looking at this, and I can't see any sign of an abutment. There's no, sure enough, after 300 years, abutment would have been swept away very largely, but there's no apparent sign of it. What's more, it looks from the angle of this stream as if this had been a bridge here, been built on the skew. And that would have been well ahead of Wade's time. So I think what I'm looking at here is the remains of a ford, which is perhaps why it's so clearly marked, especially when the river's in flood there. Anyhow, look, going on a bit further north, here's now climbing into Glen Cockle. The road is coming around the corner here, substantially built. It then curves around here, and here's part of the original surface showing. Here's the modern road. It takes a more leisurely course in the same glen. And here, looking the other way, is the road, again in good condition. I mean, you can walk on that very easily there. But here, just over that hill, the road then is quite spectacular. I think it goes straight across all this swamp there. And that, I think, is a mistake. I think that was Wade's desire to be in a straight line. And having got over this hill here, I started to walk down, and I hadn't got perhaps only 2/3 way down before the water was already over the tops of my Wellington boots. So I turned around and didn't try wading through that lot. That's why he's called General Wade. So that was a mistake, I think. And the modern road, it runs to the right and avoids all this swamp. So I think that was a consequence of that determination to keep a straight course there. In comparison, let's have a look at one of the roads that Caulfeild built there. Now, this is the Caulfeild road part of it from Braemar to Calder. I'll show on the map where it is in a minute. But this is typical Caulfeild. He learnt the lesson from Wade, I think. And so the road here it's very direct, but it's not rigidly straight. It goes in and out of curves if it suits itself. Here is the road here, actually. It runs here, then goes down into this dip across the stream, and then runs in a very direct way towards this wood over here, there towards Cargarth there. And that's Caulfeild having learned the lesson, I think. There. Here we are. That road is, sorry, it's just going down to this stream crossing. We're now, you can see the modern road is a bypass that they just ford the stream. But here's the original bridge. Again, no parapet there. They've tried to stop motorcyclists going, I think, what those blocks are for. I don't think that would have been there originally. And here's the road then carrying on. Where it is, that road is from Braemar to Colgarth, so it's that road. We're returning to have a look at a bit of that road later on. Right. Oh, yeah, sorry. Let's return to that road up towards Aberfeldy and Dalnacardoch. Here's the bridge which was built for General Wade by William Adam in 1733. A very handsome bridge, designed by Adam. Wade wanted something a bit special, and I think Adam built it for him as well. It had needed repairs in the 18th century, so it's not been entirely foolproof, but nevertheless, it's still standing very well. I don't think you can drive across it anymore, but you can certainly walk across and cycle across it there. It's certainly wide enough, still intact, and that's the River Tay underneath there. Now let's have a look. This is the final stretch of that road as it heads towards Dalnacardoch, and it's been tarmacked. But I think the present day width, or width when I took it, was back in the 1970s, this is probably not much wider than Wade's original. I suspect a lot of this bankment is probably Wade's original. Yeah. Again, well-built road there, dead straight. Good old Wade. There. Anyhow, let's now look at Wade's final road, which was this one, the one from Ruthven, essentially, near Dalwhinnie, over the Corrierac Pass. And I'll follow this from east to west. I'll do it from end to end. There is a bit of an argument amongst the scholars as whether this bit of road is a link road, is a military road, or was it built later. This is the shot of it there, and we're now looking east, and here's that road that they're arguing about. And to me, that looks like a Wade road. I think I've no doubts at all about that, but that's the one they're arguing about. Anyhow, once we get over the gate and start heading westwards, the road here is not so clear there. There's obviously some kind of bridge or embankment here, I think. But you can see that the modern roadworks have been starting to shovel gravel on top. And indeed, a lot of alterations have made to the road here because of this flooding control of River Spey, I think. This is one road. This is another road. It's been built because of the Spey. This is the original military road, and this is a typical Wade bridge. But beware of this. These bridges, as I said, are built by contractors. They're not built by General Wade or his troops there. And they're typical of Highland Road bridges being built in that time in the century. So just because you see a bridge looking like this doesn't mean it carried a military road. There. All of the roads in the Highlands at that time were built roughly with this shape there. But it's a nice condition of it there. This is a Wade bridge. This is Gorov Bridge, or Garv Bridge. I think Gorov, I used to have an Irish lady friend. Gorov means Wigney there. And this wasn't built till 1732, whereas the rest of the road was built in a single season. Let me just get that right. It was built in a single season in 1731. Reportedly in almost incessant rain, which at least would have kept the midges down there. And if you've been in the Highlands with midges, you'll know what that's not a joke there. So for a year, General Wade and his troops have had to ford across. This is the Spey again, just here. But that's a genuine Spey bridge. Sorry, genuine Wade bridge. Right, so let's carry on. We're now heading, this is the Spey, coming down from around the back of the Corrierac. And a bit narrower than Wade's other roads because of the difficult territory. And another Wade bridge. This one's partly collapsed. You can see daylight through it. I crossed it very gingerly, I can tell you. But there is a bit of a parapet up here, which may have been added later. I don't know. But that's a bit unusual if it is. And here we are carrying on, still tarmacked here, I think, or at least gravelled. It carries on along here until it comes to this, which is the Corrierac there. And it's got to get over that. So here we are entering the Corrierac. Here's the Corrie just here. And here it is digging into the soft ground. This is bits of the Spey coming down, I think, just starting. And I've tried to sharpen up this picture so you can see the famous zigzag that General Wade built. The road comes round over here and then begins this zigzag up here. I hope it's clear on your screens there. And it goes up, zigzagging up there, until eventually it goes over the top just about here. I think. And this, I think, is absolutely remarkable engineering achievement. It is a condition it's in nowadays, and this was built in 1731 there. Look at this. I mean, it's terrific, isn't it? Terrific condition. And what's more, it's on an extremely steep hillside. I mean, there we are looking down. Here's the road coming across to come from the Carrière Pass. Here it is coming into the base, and here's the zigzag starting. And from the weather alone, let alone the fact it was so steeply sloping, I'd have thought this lot would have slid down the hillside in the first 3 or 4 years, but it's still there. It's quite remarkable. And Wade was very proud of this, and so he should have been. I think that's a terrific job. Anyway, it's good. Need to say that's looking east there, back and back. Now we're over the top. We're also looking east, back to where the top was, and you can see that it's much less wiggly there. The road is also being used, I presume, by the Christie board to keep an eye on these pylons, to service them and so on. It was go over the pass in the same place, or did when I took the picture anyway. There's some Wade bridges to be seen. This one's a bit further down. Again, no parapet on that one. And sometimes the modern traffic has gone off and crossed its brook at this stream here on its own. But the original Wade Road carries on here. And sometimes it's easier to see this when you're sideways onto it. So, for instance, here you can see the Wade Road, and also this has been scraped away by Wade and his soldiers. And this is part of that modern road with the Land Rovers on it. This is a bit further down. It's more difficult to follow precisely. I think this is the Wade Road coming down here. But just from observation, I mean, I couldn't be certain, but I think that's it there. And then that's looking back up towards the Carrière. And then looking further down, there's been a modern roadworks or tracks rebuilding being done here, a stone wall built. I think that's on top of the Wade Road. But again, I couldn't be certain. I couldn't see anything here at all in the things. That's Loch Ness in the distance. This is Fort Augustus, just off the picture to the left. And here with that road we looked at earlier, climbing up on the eastern side of Loch Ness. Oh, sorry, yes, of Loch Ness. Yeah, there. And the final stretch of the road is in between two stone walls. It looks like a country lane. This is it. And it's just about to join the A82. See a car there. That's the A82, which is exactly on top of the military road from Fort William to Fort Augustus. So that was the road over the Carrière Pass. Quite an achievement, I think, there. Right, Sabadeco. Now, Wade also surveyed a road from Ruthven to Braemar, but apparently it was never built. So I don't know why. Perhaps he couldn't get the money raised for it, because all the money for this road programme was funded by Parliament each year. But apart from this correction to this road between Fort Augustus and Inverness, that was the end of his road building in 1732, 1733. Apart from finishing off the bridges, like the High Bridge at Spain Bridge there. Incidentally, I've just remembered, I've forgotten to tell you one thing about. Well, I'll try and come back to it afterwards there. Anyway, at 1732, Major Caulfeild was appointed as Wade's Chief Inspector of Military Roads. And his main activities at the time would have been maintenance of these roads in red there. But in 1740, Wade accepted a new commission elsewhere I believe it was in Flanders. And then the construction of new military roads began under Caulfeild, very cautiously. It began by linking the road from Stirling to Crieff, because obviously they felt that road, which had been thought to be good enough before, now wasn't, needed doing there. And that was done in 1741 to 42. But then began a more substantial road over the Rest and Be Thankful up to Inverary from Dumbarton. Dumbarton's off the screen here, isn't it? Shouldn't be. Anyway, Dumbarton's down here. And here's the road going through Inverary there, over the Rest and Be Thankful. But apparently the situation appears to be becoming increasingly unsettled in the Highlands. And perhaps what is not widely known is that France planned a major invasion of Britain in 1744. They were clearly hoping that Scots, the Jacobites, would rise up at the same time and take over Scotland. But France was planning a major invasion of Britain in 1744. It was called off, apparently, because the weather was deemed unsuitable. However, next year, Bonnie Prince Charlie launched his own uprising in 1745. And they made very good use of Wade's roads, coming in from Glen Shiel, like it was, who he raised his standard there. The interesting thing there is that Bonnie Prince Charlie's invasion, and he took control of Scotland in 1745, not only made good use of Wade's roads, but it scarcely seemed to have stopped the road building programme. It was paused for only a year or so. And it's also possible that because of that uprising, which was quenched at the Battle of Culloden near Inverness, that the road building programme was resumed. And the emphasis at the time was on a new road from Stirling up to Fort William, so from the south to the north, and another new road from Blairgowrie near Cooper Angus up to the new fort being built after the uprising at Fort George. So again, the connections from the south upwards, rapid movement of troops from the south, were key factors of what was going on there. And this road from Stirling to Fort William was built from 1748 to 1753, and it incorporated the famous Devil's Staircase, and that's just here, another big zigzag, just north of where what's marked as King's House. And it makes an interesting comparison with Wade's Corrierac Pass Road, because sorry, the screen appears to have frozen. I'm sorry about that. We appear to have a break in service. Let's try again. Oh, here we are. Yes, I don't know what happened there. Right, this is the entrance to Glencoe here. We're now looking south. This is the military road coming up the Devil's Staircase. And it wriggles in amongst the rocks, you can see there. But it's not a major engineering piece. It's simply wriggling between the rocks. And of course, very difficult there. That was built in, well, sometime between 1748 and 1753. And here on the other side of the Devil's Staircase, looking towards Kinlochleven, you can see that it wriggles a lot there for heading for Kinlochleven, which is over here and down over the right, drop there. And then from Kinlochleven, it then carries on over these hills here to Fort William. Now that was abandoned in 1785, and they constructed a new road down Glencoe instead. Sorry, but yeah, let me just show this the road itself. So this is part of the surface of that road, which was abandoned, and this may show part of the original construction. It is pretty solid, I think, there. But it's well, the other thing is this is now part of the West Highland Way, so it's a well-maintained, popular recreational walk. And it may be that some of this is to do with maintenance of the West Highland Way. You can't tell really, I'm afraid, there. But anyway, it's still clearly visible, a solid foundation there. Now, this program accelerated very rapidly there. But the difference really was that Wade had only built one road at a time, and he was personally involved in each of them. He went to see what was going on, inspecting all the way there frequently. Whereas Caulfeild had multiple roads under construction at the same time, and he clearly couldn't be everywhere at once. So as a result, many more military roads were built under Caulfeild. I'll show you just a couple of examples of that. The first one is this road from Blairgowrie up through Braemar, Cordarth. I've already shown that bit from Braemar to Cordarth, up to Grantown on Spey, and then through Darver and Dulcie Bridge there to Fort George. And I'll show you this bit just north of Grantown on Spey. Here it's shown on the open access Oldham survey map. Here's Grandtown on Spey just here. The military road is this one. It turns off here, off the present main road, which is A939, as it says, and takes its own course through here, past a farm called Annabord, and then the main road, and then joins it again. This green dots here are the is what's known as the Darver Way, which is the course of the old original Highland Railway line from Forres down to Avonmore, which we're looking at the bridge on just over here, down this way. And in case you're asking, yes, I've walked this way too. I've walked all that before it became a registered public footpath. Anyhow, so let's go and have a look at this road. We'll take a look there, just where this tarmac bit stops, and look at it carrying on at Camerori. So here we are, tarmac stopped just here. This is the military road carrying on. Looks a bit like a farm track, doesn't it? But you see it's hollowed out. And around the corner, looking back, there's quite a substantial revetment and settlement here. Looks quite solid. Here it is climbing up beside a wood, and I think the steepness of this climb may be why they altered the later main road to be a bit further to the east of that. Otherwise, I can't see any reason why this should have been replaced. Anyway, a bit further on, here's the military road running along through here. We get into bracken and heather country here. And a bit further on, the military road, believe me, is running straight forward across here. It's actually clearer. You can see the shape of it more clearly when you're actually walking on it than you can by seeing it. But believe me, that is the road they're running there. At this point, the road turns more northeasterly, and it may look as if the road's very wide here, but in fact, this is, I think, just a trick of the undergrowth. The actual road itself, I think, is about here, and it's only about the same width as it was earlier. There. And here it is approaching Annabord Farm here. You can see the gate, which was the entrance to the farmyard at one stage. The farm's still in pasture. You can see it's got sheep in it, but the military road runs past the farm just here. And the bridge to get over the river Annabord, to get to Annabord Farm, is this thing, which is not, I think, a military bridge. It's got a parapet. Sorry, it's got a pier. Thought of the word. A pier here, abutment here, and so on. No, that's not typical. And also, it's only wood on top. It was precarious when I went across it. And I believe, looking at it on Google Earth a couple of nights ago, there's only one timber left now going across. So if you're going to be following this road up there, then I think you need to be prepared to forge the river. Anyhow, here we are looking past the farm. Here's where the road has been, showing a little bit in the colour of the grass. Here it is running here, filled in. But here it's starting to appear as the typical gouged out road. Looking the other direction, looking north, here is the road here, and further north here. And you can see it's typical coalfield. It's not rigidly straight, but it is very direct. It twigs, twists and turns where the countryside doesn't suit there. So again, typical coalfield there. Not very wide, and I think it's fair to say the standards have slipped. This isn't as wide as the Wade roads, and isn't as impressive, I think. A bit later, a farm track picks it up and goes across this bridge, which is not a military road bridge. Anyhow, that's that one. So by way of a grand finale, I'll now take you on this road here, from the road to the Isle of Skye. Here's the Isle of Skye here. Actually, strictly, it's a road from Fort Augustus to Bernera, which is near the shortest crossing point onto the Isle of Skye. It isn't actually there, it just runs to the barracks. All 43 miles of it were built in 1755 to 1763, quite late, really. And we'll take it from end to end, but let's just jump into the history a bit and have a look. The military road, classically, does a zigzag out of Fort Augustus, quite a steep zigzag, climbs steadily to the high ground here, then drops steadily down to Glen Moriston. Not Morrison, Moriston. But Telford, when he built his road from Fort Augustus into Glen Moriston, went the long way around. He went beside Loch Ness up to Invermoriston and then along here. along the glen itself. And when he got here, he built his road on top of the military road for a bit. So let's begin by having a look here. So this is a forestry road, which is supposed to be on top of the military road. I'd set the books for that. But anyway, I'm glad that there was a signpost, because I wouldn't have found it otherwise. There's a thing saying public path on the old military road. It's really essentially a hole in the hedge. If I hadn't had that sign, I think I'd have missed it. But here is the military road climbing up, starting the zigzag. And here we are, partly on the zigzag. Nothing like as well crafted as the one on Corrierac Pass. But you do get good views of Fort Augustus. There's Loch Ness, Fort Augustus here. Here's the Caledonian Canal running along there. I don't know if you can see the road. I think you can just see a bit of the road starting to climb on the eastern side of Loch Ness. Anyhow, so we're carrying up. The forestry roads aren't helping here, because I think this is the military road, but it's very hard to tell. It runs, I think, between here. They've overridden parts of it. Here up on top, you can see the military road here, looking pretty scrappy, isn't it? It carries on over here and then turns left to run down into Glen Morriston. Here it is turning left. Again, it's not as good a condition as the Wade roads, I think, in places. Oh, until there's some gravel here. You can follow it. It's a bit bumpy. It carries on down eventually into a wood. Unfortunately, the woodland people have left a gap where the road went, which is rather obliging of them, because I don't think I'd have noticed it otherwise. Anyhow, a bit further down, there's this unspoiled Wade Bridge. And since Telford's road was opened in 1819, and superseded this road, almost certainly this bridge has not been touched since 1819. It's in very good condition. No parapets again, notice. So a bit later on, we got the Telford roads on top, and notice the road surface is totally different. It's cambered. This is Telford, right? Building his road on top of the earlier military road, building it like a Roman road. And also a bit of a parapet. Looks like he had to go repairing the bridge as well there. However, after running together for a short while, the military road takes its own course just up here and runs to the north of the modern road, which I think is Telford's there. And we'll have a look at this just here, because it gets itself into difficulties, and also just here where it comes down to rejoin the modern road. So here we are. It's got to cross this gulch, and this is the road here. It's pathetic, isn't it? I mean, it runs over here then. And you can just about make out the shape of it, but honestly, you can think the people who built this road didn't have their hearts in it. I think you can say that for sure there. And a bit further on, here it is squiggling down to join what would later be the main road, which was Telford's road, I think. But then the road has to go around a promontory, round about there, I think. And typical military road, it doesn't do that. It goes over the top, doesn't it? So look at it going over here. And here it is coming down the other side. There. Again, looking scrappy as it goes along there. You can still work out roughly what the shape of it was, but it's not very good. And here it enters the top of Glen Shiel. This is the modern road, which I think is largely on top of Telford's road. So let's get the pointer running. That's the modern road. This here, you can perhaps just about make it out, is the military road. I think it runs down here. I couldn't follow it myself, actually. I think it runs down about here, then crosses over to this side of the River Shiel, and then runs close to the River Shiel near the bed of the river. So here we are. It is running along here near the bed of the river, and then it comes to Glen Shiel, or the Shiel Bridge, and then climbs very steeply here over the Rattigan Forest. There, very steeply indeed, you'll see in a minute. And then it runs down to Bernera, which is quite close to where the ferry crosses at Carlery, there, crosses to Skye. But I want to, let's just draw your attention to this bit here. This is an example, good example. Here's the military road running along very neatly, fairly straightforward, along by the River Shiel there. And suddenly it turns left to a right angle, or more than that, and it climbs up for about 200 yards and then crosses and then runs on high terraces round on high ground over here. And I think this is a classic case of what happened quite often with the military roads, particularly in Caulfeild's time. This here is a swamp there. I'll show you that in a minute. And I think when the bridge builders were commissioned, they planned to build the road across here. But the bridge builders said, no way, we can't build a bridge across on a swamp like that. We'll build it up here. You have to divert the road. So I think the road was then diverted up to climb to this and then run across here, terrace across and rejoin the original road plan for the road just here. And here we are standing in the swamp, looking back at that terrace, and I think I can just, when I have face perhaps, I can just make out that terraceway running along here. Okay. Above the swamp, obviously. I mean, they'd learned the lesson as well there. I managed to get up to that terraceway anyway, and here it is. You know, and could you call this a road? Really, there, it's pathetic, I think. There. Well, Thomas Telford was justifiably rude about this road. He called it a vestige of a road. And that was only 50 years after it had been built. There. Anyhow, here's now going up to the next shot is the climb up to Rattigan. So that's the Glen Shiel, head of Shiel, Glen Shiel. And here's the modern road climbing up to Rattigan. And I think there's bits of an earlier road here as well. Now, I think that's probably Telford. Oh, hang on, there's a bit of earlier road just here as well, isn't there? I think that's probably Telford. So it may have obliterated part of the military road. But anyhow, going up there, you can see some lovely views of what's known as the Five Sisters of Kintail there. And this is almost certainly a Telford bridge. So I think that'll be the Telford road. It's got a parapet for a start, but this height is typical Telford when it gets across tricky country there. So where the military road is just here, I don't know. It could have been somewhere around here, I guess, but I don't know. Didn't find it. But here's the road, modern road, climbing very steeply. Here, you can see it running here. And look at this. Imagine getting brake failure on that, eh? Oh, boy. Anyway, this was the road Johnson and Boswell were on in 1773, only 10 years after it had been completed. And they reported soldiers working on the road, regrabbing the bits that had been swept away. And Johnson was terrified of going up here in case his horse stumbled. Because if his horse had stumbled, it had rolled on top of him and he'd have been down here, looking simply the worse for wear. The next view is from partway up that climb, and Telford, when he decided to rebuild the road to Rattigan, also decided that a better place to cross to Skye was from the Kyla Loch. So he also built a new road, and this is it here, running around the head of Loch Duich there. Hope I've got that right. And I think this is the Telford road running along here where the houses are. I think this is a more modern road cut in for motor traffic. But I think that's the Telford road. This is Loch Duich, and this is the head of Loch Duich. Yeah. Well, anyway, when we get to the top of Rattigan Pass, then there's only one way that the military road, Telford's road, and the modern road could go. And as you can see, it's a slope, very steep hillside. So the military road's under this somewhere. And that's the Isle of Skye over there in the distance. So that's where we're heading. And here's the barracks at the bottom. There's two sets of barracks. That's that one there and this one here. A bit like the ones at Rusford, except they're not elevated at all. There's another shot of one of the Roman barracks there. I don't think they're open to the public. You can walk around them, but I don't think you can visit them. I think they're regarded a bit too dangerous. Right. No, sorry, wrong button. Okay, I'll just digress here a minute and show you very quickly what happens with the tide. See, this is the sea here, and it runs up through here, and this is where the ferry is at Carray, or Carree. And I took this shot, so I went up to the ferry and had a look. This is the ferry pad at the Burner side, and this is the ferry pad on the Skye side. And the boat, this ferry, has just taken off from here. And you might think, what on earth is he doing going over there? Because that's where the thing is. Well, the answer is this. It's the tide coming in. And this water here, you can see, is absolutely still, completely untouched. And this is like a running mountain river there. So next shot, we can see the boat just about to turn into it. It looks as if there's a whirlpool starting to form here. But that's the tide. That's not a river, that's the tide coming in. And then is the final shot here. Here's the jetty at, on Skye. Here's the boat, a little bit upstream of it. there, but he's got a land alongside it there. And here's the original jetty. And you can see how the tide has just swept him down there. So he knew what was coming. He obviously does this every day of the week in the summer. Anyway, just an eye-opener. Anybody who's sailed on the west coast of Scotland will know how terrifying the tides can be at times. And that's just the sea moving. Anyhow, right, where are we now? Now, yes, the road building carried on after Caulfeild's death there. Mostly of roads already planned, but this Dumfries and Galloway road, I haven't photographed it there. It wasn't part of the responding to the Jacobite uprising. It was to do with the shortest distance, sea distance by sea to get to Ireland. And it was built to get troops to Ireland as quickly as possible in case some situation arose over there. So it counts as a military road, but it wasn't part of the rest of these there. And I don't have any pictures because I couldn't, when I looked at it, I couldn't easily distinguish what was this original road, what was rebuilt. It made a lot of use of original roads. So the roads that were actually then built were this one, a new one down Glencoe in 1786, yeah, and this one up the side of Lochlinny, and also the Dumbarton to Stirling road, this one here. There was a road there before, they decided to improve it. So what happened to the military roads after them? Well, some parts were just abandoned. You can see that we've been looking at some of them there. The road of the Carriac Pass, so this one here, that became formally abandoned in 1828, except for its bridges, and that was for the cattle. So essentially then it reverted to being just a drove road. And as we've seen, the first part of the military road to Bernera was superseded by Telford's new road up here in Invermoriston, just here. Anyway, much information about what happened afterwards came from this book, which is by A.R.B. Haldane, published in 1962 by Thomas Nelson and Sons in Edinburgh. And to see what happened next, the best I think is to consult a timeline. So let's go and have a look at a timeline. Caulfeild died in 1767, having already built 608 miles with another 200 or so on the go. So a total of nearly 800 are responsible for. But the Jacobite threat was receding. So basically a review was conducted about the cost of maintaining the road, any way of cutting down on this. And it's proposed that the Highland counties, which could afford it, ought to pay for the upkeep of the roads. Well, in 1773 was Boswell and Johnson's tour of the Highlands. That's when Johnson had a fright. Sorry. And then another survey of military roads in 1785 found them to very poor repair. And the British Fisheries Society was established in 1786 to try and promote fishing, because what was happening was the military roads had enabled much better people, much better, wealthier people, to buy land in the Highlands and start farming in more efficient ways. And so, although there were some Highland clearances, a lot of it was actually down to the people being unable to make their subsistence economies tenable. And so they emigrated in big waves. And this caused this society to be set up to try to find ways around it. One way which they came up with is to try and promote fishing around the coasts as a new means of livelihood. Well, by 1788, the government had twigged really that the Jacobite threat wasn't there anymore, and anybody on the ground would have known that anyway. So the soldiers were, well, there was a dearth of soldiers, so they were no longer required to repair the military roads. Contract labour was used instead. But General Abercrombie recommended the roads be kept for civilian use, even though it was agreed they weren't ideal there. And so what happened after that was quite interesting. A surveyor called George Brown from Elgin surveyed a number of possible roads to the north of the Great Glen, that's the Fort William to Inverness Road, did it for the government there. I'll come back to discuss George Brown shortly because an interesting character, interesting situation. But then Thomas Telford had begun acting as a surveyor for the British Fisheries Society. And I suspect that was because of Sir William Pulteney, who was one of the directors of the society and a great benefactor of Telford. But meanwhile, in 1793, General Roy, have I skipped that? No, beg pardon. no. 1793, the survey of Scotland, which Roy had been conducting, was deposited in the King's Library and all but forgotten. So it was, I'll come back to that survey in a bit. Meanwhile, Telford became the official engineer for the British Fisheries Society. Now, Telford in the early 1800s, 1812, surveyed possible roads and harbours in the Highlands right up as far as Wick, and he reported to the Treasury. He recommended construction of roads, bridges and the Caledonian Canal up to the Great Glen. And I think it was this pushing from Telford in particular, but also from the British Fisheries Society, they got the government to act. And so in 1803, two parliamentary commissions were set up, first of all to build Highland roads and bridges, and one to build the Caledonian Canal. And the engineer for both was Telford. The costs of the new roads and bridges were to be 50-50 met, but locally and government, but the public purse was entirely responsible for the canal. It cost them a lot too. Anyhow, what happened was in 1805, Aaron Arrowsmith was engaged to produce a complete map of Scotland, and halfway through the job, he discovered that Roy's survey had already done the job, and he found out, so he used it to make use of his new map of Scotland. Now, in 1813 or 14, this Commission for Highland Road and Bridges took over the maintenance of the remaining military roads, those that hadn't been abandoned. But they did it with an annual government grant, but as any excess to be met by the counties, it was probably 50-50, although the county had to cough up if there's any overspend. However, Perthshire and Dunbartonshire, as we've seen, opted out of this arrangement and let the military roads go to rack and ruin. Right. Well, yes. Let's. I'll come back to that. Let's go back to George Brown here. Now, Brown was a senior figure. He was the provost by the way, in Scotland. Is roughly the same as mayor in England. Provost of Scotland at least 7 times. He died in 1816. He was an experienced and respected surveyor. And he surveyed 4 roads north of the Great Glen, including from Dingwall to Ullapool, Fort William to Arisaig, and then from Glengarry to Loch Horn, and all of which were subsequently approved and built under Telford. So Telford got the action to happen, but it looks like the original plans for the roads were Brown's in those cases there. Anyhow, so Telford's 2 surveys seem to kick things into action there. Yes. And so because of the British Fisheries Society was trying to promote fishing, this is why so many of Telford's new roads headed for harbours there. Yes, now the work on Telford's roads was largely complete by 1821. So after that, the Commission was largely responsible just for the maintenance there. But the Arrowsmith's map is reproduced at the back of Haldane's book, and all of the roads that Telford built are marked in red. So you can see here north of Dingwall, north of Inverness actually, apart from the road from Glenmoriston all of these roads are new. They weren't military roads at all. And these roads still exist pretty much as they are. This has been partly rebuilt. We're up to Wick and Thurso, but a lot of it is still there. And in fact, a bit further down, this is the Telford Road out to Bernera, and then you built roads on Skye as well. But if you want to see in an armchair a good Telford road, then you look at this. There's a YouTube video of somebody driving along this road. I think they drove from this end, Kinloch Horn, this way, and finished up in the dark. But it's a good indication of what the road would have been like. It's just tarmacked there. Anyhow, what this map also shows are in green lines are the military roads which the Commission overtook the maintenance for. So these were which were largely preserved. And they're still in use, some of them, of course, as well. And then where they're dashed is where they weren't maintained by Perthshire and Dunbartonshire. And so these are now roads which are neglected and ruined there. Now, a very good indication of history, I'm just coming to an end, I'm just going to watch the time. A very good indication of the history of military comes from this book by Alan Lawson. Alan was Yeah. Alan was, that's right, he was the archivist for, it's called A Country Called Stratherick, and this is the second edition. Is published in 2006. The first edition was published in 1987. There, and this describes what happens, among other things, over history, including with the roads, in the Stratherick. And Stratherick is a region roughly halfway between Fort Augustus and Inverness, on the eastern side of Loch Ness. So the original Wade roads went through there. Now this, by the way, I'm told by the Society that South Loch Ness Heritage Group, that copies of this book are still available on their website. And would you believe it? It's only £7.75 according to their website, including postage. Ooh, that's a snip, I think. It's a great book. I think it's a lovely way of describing this part of Scotland and how it matured. Anyhow, this map is in the book by Betsy Lawson, who I guess must have been a relative of Alan. And this shows the original military road here, running up here, crossing at the White Bridge. And then it's shown dashed here quite correctly as guessed, because they don't know where it went. And then it's thought this is where it went on to Essex and Inverness here, and that's fairly clear. So that was built in 1731, so 1726 or 7. This is the road built in 1732 or 1733, again another military road. And then Telford came on the scene, and this is the road he commissioned to be built down to Inverfarigate, and there's a little pier there. Again, it's to do with fishing, I think. And that was aimed to be built by 1810. And then I think Telford also got this road built in about 1819, which runs to near Torness, or runs to join the old military road anyway, just there. And then the county got involved, and they built this road from Erogi all the way down this way, to replace this early first military road there. They also built this road to Torness from Telford's road there, and they were in place by 1835 apparently, and so this one here as well. So that gives you some idea of how the road network developed in this small part of Scotland. Now, personalities then. Wade and Caulfeild, I spelt it right, but it's a very, very funny spelling, were both Irishmen. Wade was born near Mullingar and Caulfeild born near Portlaoise. This is a portrait of General Wade by a Dutch artist, apparently, called Johan van Diest. Thought it was. It's thought to have been painted about 1731, when the Corrierac Pass Road was being built. And I think you can tell that the artist had never seen it. So I think Wade just told him to put a squiggle there, which he did. Anyway, that's General Wade there. He was a Major General when he went to Scotland in 1724. He was Commander-in-Chief of North Britain at the end of 1724. He was appointed Lieutenant General in 1727, appointed a full general in 1739, and a Field Marshal in 1743. But unfortunately, it wasn't a success as a Field Marshal. He lost some battles, lost ground to the French in Flanders, I believe, in the 1740s. And then in it went in the Jacobite uprising, Bonnie Prince Charlie's uprising. He stationed his majority of his forces that he had, most of them were still abroad, but most of the forces he had, he stationed them in the Newcastle area, assuming that Bonnie Prince Charlie would march down the Great North Road. But Bonnie Prince Charlie didn't. He went down through Carlisle, which made a lot of sense because he had a lot of support in Lancashire. He got a lot of Catholic support as well. And also, when the Bonnie Prince Charlie turned round in Darwin, because he wasn't raising the support that he expected there from the English, he went back through Carlisle, and again, Wade didn't get across to stop him. So Wade was replaced as Commander-in-Chief of Britain, the force in Britain, by the Duke of Cumberland, who was called Augustus, which is why Fort Augustus is called that, and he was a brother of King George II at the time. Right, on to Caulfeild. We're not certain this is a picture of Caulfeild. It's a picture of a military officer, but it's thought to be Major Caulfeild there. It's by George Knapton, and it's undated. He was a Chief Inspector of Roads by Wade in 1732, but also appointed Deputy Governor of Inverness Castle, which was Inverness Jail, in 1747, appointed a Lieutenant Colonel in 1751, but he was always known as Major Caulfeild or Governor Caulfeild. In some ways, he was better connected than Wade because he was a grandson of the first Viscount Charlemont. Now, on to General Roy, who conducted that survey of Scotland, and I managed to skip over. Sorry about that. This is the only picture of him which I've been able to locate, and that's thank you very much to Humphrey Welfare, who has just written a book on General Roy. He was the person who instigated the Ordnance Survey, who was credited for it there. And I believe there's a new version, a softback version of Humphrey's book due to come out later this year. I guess it'll be the University of Edinburgh Press. This appears to be a miniature. It's not known by whom, and it's not known for certain if it was General Roy, although it was attributed to him, would you believe it, at a sale in Toronto in 2019. Anyhow, at the beginning of his career, he was surveying Scotland at the same time as Caulfeild was. But I don't think, in my view, they had much to do with each other. And I think here's why. The Duke of Cumberland had real problems getting his army across to Culloden because he didn't know the countryside. And so Colonel David Watson, one of his subordinates, conceived the idea of creating a properly surveyed map of Scotland. And this was endorsed by the Duke very warmly, who got the King's approval, his brother. And William Roy, who was then just plain Mr. Roy, was appointed to carry it out there. Subsequently, he took a commission in the army and was eventually promoted to Major General in 1781. But this he did. So he covered the whole of Scotland, apart from the islands, between 1747 and 1755. And however, the Board of Ordnance weren't enthusiastic, wanted the available money to go to building military roads. And hence, Roy and Caulfeild seem to have been working apart. Roy was working from Fort Augustus, Caulfeild was working from Inverness. And in essence, the two surveys were not only competitive, but they're also quite different. Roy's was essentially a rapid reconnaissance. Where are all the mountains, where are the lochs, where are the rivers, what's their relationship to each other? Whereas Caulfield's service were the avoidance of mountains, gaining local knowledge of ground in valleys, where the swamps, and so where the precipices, where the rivers best crossed, where they're least likely to get snowed up. And so hence Caulfeild had no need for Roy's work. But there was a remarkable sequel to Roy's work because it was almost totally unused as far as we know. As far as we know, there's no evidence it was ever used for military purposes. And Watson died in 1761, and copies of the maps, or the maps themselves, were found amongst his papers. And in due course, they were deposited in the King's Library in 1793, as I was saying there, until they were rediscovered and used by Arrowsmith for his map of Scotland in the early 1800s. Now, I have a two-page paper written on the Caulfeild-Roy situation, and I could email this to people on request if they're interested. But I just wonder, I can ask Mike afterwards if maybe we could post this into the RRRA, Roman Roads Association's newsletter. It's not to do with Roman roads, but I thought people might be generally interested in it. Just prevent my slant on the situation. Humphrey Welfare has told me there's no evidence to suggest there was acrimony between Roy and Caulfeild. Finally, Thomas Telford. Nowadays, the best-known engineer of his time, but he wasn't at the time. The best-known engineer at his time was John Rennie, who was a famous fellow Lowland Scot, slightly younger than Telford, but he died before Telford. He was brilliant in mechanical engineering as well as civil engineering, although not much of his mechanical engineering survived, of course. But he had little interest in roads, which was one of Telford's strong points. And Telford had a considerable ability to pick and delegate to highly capable subordinates and organise massive programmes of work, which is why I think he was put in charge of the Caledonian Canal and the Highland roads in Scotland. However, he came unstuck in a big way with the Caledonian Canal, which went grossly over budget and time. But also he admitted he made lots of mistakes in the early part of the Highland roads and bridges. Several of the bridges fell in, and several of the road building was underestimated. So just return to the timeline and finish things off there. You can see really from this that the military roads in Scotland essentially just generally melted into the background of Highland roads there, and subsequently were taken over or created by Telford, and his roads similarly were assimilated into the background, and to create the road network which largely exists today there. The Tollgate Act answered the problem of who pays for the roads. That allowed a number of roads, including the military roads, to have toll gates installed on them. The closure of the Highland Commission was, most of its work after 1721 was just concerned with maintenance. Good. Well, that's the end of the talk. I'm sorry if I haven't gone on so long, but I'll be very happy to take any questions if people have them there. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, John. Just bear a second while I change my screen slightly. There we go. Thank you very much for a fascinating talk, and don't worry about overrunning. You've known enough of my talks to know that you're just an amateur at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hold my hand up. I am the worst. We do have some questions, quite a few actually. So we'll get through them as quickly as we can.
Yeah, do my best.
I just very quickly want to, before we do that, I want to apologise for anybody who had difficulty getting in. We seem to have had some major issues with the reminder emails from Eventbrite, but hopefully I can get to the bottom of that. Just for everyone's information, we are considering switching our booking system for the next season, but we'll let everybody know in due course. Anyway, on to questions. Firstly, from Jan Scott. Did the army have engineers at the time? And if so, did they have any input with Wade? And why was it built with such a bad design? We're not sure which design Jan's referring to there when she's talking about Wade or Caulfeild, but I assume Wade, as she's mentioning him.
Yes, that bad design seemed to start with Wade. I don't know how it originated. It's possible the general himself there. Certainly he would have engineers amongst his corps there. I mean, the army had engineers. And in fact, what's interesting is there was a military road between Newcastle and Carlisle, which was built in the middle of this period, and it was surveyed by two engineers from the army, Captain Dougal Campbell and Hugh Debbick, I think his name is. There. And interestingly, Debbick went off to join then General Roy's survey in Scotland. He worked there for about a year or so. That came from Humphrey Welfare. It was very helpful there. So yes, but with regard to the pictures, I mean, I could perhaps just scamper through that and just see the one we're talking about. Yeah, this one here, isn't it? Here's the road coming up, and this poor construction. It's probably the quickest way of building a road through rough country. There, and if you accept the fact Wade was in a hurry, he may well determine that's the best way of doing it. There are diagrams explaining what the theory is. This is what I showed you on the next slide. That's this one here, but I think that's a bit theoretical. I suspect if you hit hard ground after scraping the scrub aside, then basically they'd just gravel it, and that'd be it. Yes,
I know you didn't draw comparisons really in your talk, but I think this is actually a good example to mention the differences really between the military roads and the Roman roads. Actually emphasize what may be one of the major reasons why it did take so long for some roads to actually be built in the Roman period. Yes. To get the quality you needed takes time.
Yes, indeed.
Wade didn't have time.
Yes, I think that's right. I think my guess is, I've never done any experimental archaeology, but my guess is that 100 men would have built 200 yards of Wade's road as against 100 yards of Roman road, roughly that sort of scale, because they had just more to carry and shove in place. That's just a guess.
I've just noted a question coming in, and it sort of half relates to it, so I'm going to ask it. It was from Adrian, I didn't catch the surname, who asked if any of the military roads were actually built over the top of Roman roads.
No. Almost certainly not. It's a good question. No, there are Roman roads and military roads almost side by side, actually, going out of Ardagh, for instance, going north. But I think Wade didn't attempt to build on top of Roman roads. And in fact, of course, most of the Roman roads are south of General Wade's roads. Wade's roads are in the Highlands. The most northerly Roman road that Margery says is in Perthshire, in Kirriemuir, but I think that's in doubt. there. But there are, I believe, traces of roads around in Poulter, where David Walliscroft and Birgitta Hoffman have been excavating and exploring. And I believe they're due to publish very shortly. Well worthwhile watching out for that.
Yes, it would. I'm glad you mentioned that. I wasn't aware that they were finally close to publication. It's taken a while.
That's what I thought is the case. I hope I'm not missing.
I'll check. An observation rather than a question. This is from Sheila Clark.
Yeah.
Caulfeild used contours far more than Wade did. Any comments, John?
Well, I think I'd put it differently. I think Wade would take a straight line through difficult country, whereas Caulfeild would take a wiggly one. I think that's more to it. I don't think Caulfeild was a great one for following contours any more than Wade was. But it's just, given the ground, I think he was prepared to waver much more than Wade.
Okay. There was a question in the chat from Paul Redgate. Now, this was actually answered by Paul Morris, but I'll put it anyway. Yes. At what point did the Highlands cease to be heavily forested?
Oh, much earlier. I think it was thought to be. Well, there's the Caledonian forest, which the Romans mentioned, didn't they? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of forest now, much more forest now than there was 200 years ago, because they're all planted. I don't know, Mike. If you know the answer on that.
Well, I can only tell you what Paul Morris has put in as reply. Yeah. Partially as a result of climatic changes before significant human interference. For example, on Rannoch Moor.
Oh yes.
But mostly by humans in the centuries preceding. So it was mostly gone by the early 18th century.
Yes. I don't think Caulfeild wiggled around any trees.
No. Somebody else on, Paul Redgate, the original questioner, came back to that. Apparently, he understood that Montrose utilised forests in his campaigns against the Covenanters.
I know nothing.
I'm not aware.
No, I'm sorry. I know nothing about that. And that took a bit off my subject. But I'm sorry.
Apologies, Paul. We can't help you with that one. I'm sure there'll be something on the internet somewhere.
Yes.
We have quite a lot of comments about various roads. You can still drive across the bridge at Aberfeldy.
Can you?
Although apparently there's traffic lights now.
Oh, didn't that's good news. Didn't realise that. That'd be exciting. It's single track, yeah. You couldn't have two track, but I thought it wasn't. It was just too much risk. Oh, interesting. Nice to know.
And, no, you did sort of invite this one, John, because you apologised in advance for some of your pronunciations.
Oh yes.
And Paul Morris again has pointed out that the usual emphasis in Scottish place names is towards the end. So Kinlochleven.
Yes.
The emphasis being at the back of the.
Yes, I thought that's how I'd pronounce that one. That's why I was uncertain about Rosman. Is it Rosman?
To be honest, I'd briefly nipped out of the room at that time, so I didn't catch it. Yes. Moving on. Another comment. Oh, my pronunciation is going to be terrible now. Sheila Clark. Mam Rattigan is still an interesting drive.
Oh, aye, it is. Oh, I bet you've make sure your brakes are okay. Make sure you don't conk out on that steep bit. I would not like to have an engine failure on that. You'd go backwards in a big hurry.
It's not one I know. Not been up there.
It's quite narrow in places too. But I've seen a bus go up it.
Well, if a bus can go up it, I'd be all right in my discoveries. That's fine.
It was only a single decker
next year. Another one from Michael Ellison.
Oh yes.
Who?
Hey, Mike.
Suggests or asks, didn't Telford also build a number of harbours around Scotland?
Yes, he did. Yes, absolutely.
After the British fisheries work.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Totally unaware of that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. Yes. Also, his the person afterwards, Joseph Mitchell, was one of his engineers, and he built lots of harbours as well, apparently. Right. And Joseph Mitchell built the Highland Railway line from Forres down to Perth. He built it in 2 seasons. Incredible.
Good grief.
Yeah, in that time. After all the trouble Telford had with the Caledonian Canal, he just thought it'd be difficult, but obviously Mitchell knew how to handle it. But yes, Mitchell built some harbours, but Telford also built a lot, including that pier I mentioned in Inverfarigeg.
Paul Morris, we're back to Forest again. It's important to remember that west and northwest of Scotland should actually be a temperate rainforest. It's incredible how quickly vegetation. Hang on, that doesn't make sense. How quickly humans have largely destroyed larger plant life. I think that's what he was trying to say. So trees.
Yeah.
And how plant life can overtake human interventions in the landscape.
Well,
So
I tried to show that.
I think he wrote it in a hurry, so it's
yeah, but I tried to show how quickly roads can disappear from scenery like that, even without trees growing.
indeed they do. Yeah.
But also, there's an interesting point. That picture I showed. Let's have a trying to get to it. Here we are. This one here. That picture was taken in the early 60s, I think. Oh, sorry, not early 70s, or possibly late 60s. About 30 years ago, all of this in front, it was a pointer, all of this in front was all forestry. You couldn't see this here. And now it's all gone again. So you can now stand on the road and see that alignment again. It's all happened in the last 30 years.
It is incredible how quickly the landscape can change.
Yeah, that's forestry plantation. That's of course not natural.
Yeah, and how quickly disused roads can actually get buried by it, which of course is one of the reasons why with the famous road over Blackstone Edge, sorry, moving away from Scotland, got thought to be a Roman road in the first place, and even fooled Richmond because it had been buried in a very short time.
Yes, he should have known better.
He should. And that, I think, is the last of the questions. If anybody else has another question, put it in quickly because I'm aware of the time. It is 9:20. So I'll just give it a few seconds for anybody else to put one in.
Yes, can I just chip in, Mike, with another comment?
Yes, certainly, John.
Yeah, fine. When Roy undertook his survey of Scotland, and it's a huge area he covered, and he covered it in the whole of it in 8 or 9 years. The method he was using was setting out dead straight lines at set angles there, and then his engineers would go along and note what was along the lines, but also what could be seen from them at certain angles. And then when you take all these survey results back to Edinburgh over the winter, because they weren't surveying in the winter, and then they would use it to draw an overall map of Scotland. And of course, the more survey lines you conduct, you create, the better, the more accuracy you get. Why I think that's important for us, for the Romans, is that I think that is fundamentally what the Romans were doing when carrying out reconnaissances in Britain before they conquered parts of it.
Yeah.
And once they got those survey lines and you want a road to be built and a fort to be placed, what's the easiest thing to do? Make use of the same line, because the blokes on the ground will know where the line went as well as the people on the map.
Yes. So
I think that explains, or it starts to explain, the fundamental reason why there's such straightness in the early Roman roads.
It does, but and it also draws a parallel, of course, with the work that Rob Entwistle has done over the years on for the same thing.
Yes, exactly the same. I think I'm eye to eye with Rob on that one. Yeah.
There is a comment here, Paul Morris again, who thanks you for an interesting conversation, John. I'm sure the architects of these roads would have managed some or all of a grand tour and known about Roman roads. That's quite possible. Likely, in fact. The frequent comments in the presentation about the vegetation overrunning 250-year-old roads, imagine what it does to 2,000-year-old roads. Curiously, a lot of them, it doesn't seem to do very much damage. Possibly that's because of the way they were built.
Yes, could be. I mean, LiDAR helps a great deal if you're looking for a Roman road. And that's why that lost road from above Foyers to Inverness, if or when LiDAR becomes available for that part of Strath Eric, it would be fascinating to see what shows up on the LiDAR, even with the plantations there.
A couple of messages just come through from Bob Eden. So much enthusiasm for this. Apparently, it quite perked him up, which is nice to know. And he's glad he got in.
Yes. Well, I spent a long time mugging up on it. I had to take it a bit of a gallop because I had so much material to go through.
I'm just scanning through the comments, John, to see if there's anything I need to put to you before we finally wind up.
Yes, sure.
From Jan Scott, thank you for such an interesting talk. Makes us appreciate how good the Romans were, but also how fast these were built. Ambitious, which certainly true.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
I mean, 100 miles from Dunkeld up to Inverness, done in, it was just over two years and about 3 months, I think. He's going over 100 miles.
Yeah. One very good and pertinent question, because we've been drawing a few comparisons between these and the Roman. From Neil McNaughton, where did all the materials come from for building the roads?
Usually as close as possible to it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're digging a hole, then the material's easy. You clear it out of the way and put it on either side.
Yeah. Which, of course, is exactly what the Romans did.
Yes, yes.
Precisely what they did.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you wouldn't go any further than you had to, just to get suitable materials there. Incidentally, Mike, before I forget, that situation between Caulfeild and General Roy there, so I could post it in the newsletter of the Roman Roads Research Association's newsletter, but it's nothing to do with the Romans there. So I could post it if there's general interest. Otherwise, if anybody's particularly interested, I can send them a copy.
It would be easy enough if you sent me a copy, John. I can put it onto the server, so that, and put out a web address so that anybody wanted to download it could. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yes.
Solution.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
We can put a note in the newsletter, and I'll put something on the website. Anybody wants to download it, click the button, and there it'll be.
I'll get that to yourself, Mike. No problems there at all.
Right. Okay. One final question from Roger,
yeah.
Which came in just a minute ago.
Yeah.
Did Roman surveys ever lead to accurate maps? What a question.
Haha. Yes, I think, well, I wasn't there, but I think they did there because, well, sorry, accurate maps in terms of place, because they knew where they were going, all right. What they didn't know was what the territory was like, which is why so many Roman roads, early ones, especially all the straight ones, take daft routes. I mean, the Western Main Road over near Blackburn and so on there, from oh dear, from Manchester, that takes an absolutely balmy route, and also the one over Bottonhead Fell, that road, again, it's balmy, it's so exposed, but it's sort of thing you could plan from a desktop easily, but when you've got to build it on the ground to orders, then it doesn't make so much sense. There. So
we don't actually have any what we would consider as maps that are surviving from the Roman period.
Well, there is one at Orange in France, but that's a map of what do you call it? The centuriation.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Sorry,
not quite the same thing, but
No.
that was, of course, a surveyed map, because they laid out a grid on the ground, and then it was easy to draw. So that is certainly one.
Yes.
But it's we don't really have what we would call map in terms of a paper map.
No.
It's a complex subject, is this, because there are things that come close. Ptolemy, of course, in his geography, written in the 2nd century, did locate places with coordinates, and if he's using coordinates, logically he ought to have a map, and maps from his work have been drawn later showing Scotland at a very, very weird angle. So it's almost certain that they did. How accurate that they were is another thing. The Roman military tended to record routes rather than maps in the form of itineraries. So the distance from one place to another, they weren't particularly bothered what direction it was. They were only interested in how far it was. You have interpretations of those in map form from, oh God, the name's gone out of my head. Embarrassing. It'll come to me after the talk's finished.
Yes.
Anyway,
I think some of the later Roman roads were much more designed, put done on a line of sight basis, but I think they were done on the ground. Build a road from here to here. I think a lot of the roads that David Ratledge has been uncovering, so many, are the later roads, which aren't so rigidly straight. I think the rigid ones are the early planning ones. There.
Yes, I would tend to agree with you, and I think a lot of that is down to military involvement.
Yes.
The later ones probably weren't. They're more likely to be contractors. although
Yes.
we can't prove that, but
Yeah.
it is much more likely.
Yeah.
And if for those of you who are members, you can read that in the next volume of Itinerary with regard to Lincoln and Leicestershire, because it's all in there.
All right. Great. Super.
I've
Look forward
finally
to it.
finished the damn thing. Right, I'm going to wind it up there, John,
Okay.
because it's
Thanks.
getting late.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you all for attending, and that's the end of this season. But I know that Dave is working very hard on preparing the next season's schedule, and that will be out on our website as soon as it's done. It only remains for me to thank the guys behind the scenes, which are Jeff and Dave this evening. If there's anybody else, I apologize because I was late joining. And thank you all for attending. I recognised a lot of the same names this evening as we always get, and thank you all for attending all this season's lectures. And we look forward to seeing you again later on this year.